To be a reunion, a long-awaited civil conversation between the Duchess who defied the crown and the journalist who once called her the most fascinating woman in modern monarchy. Cameras were rolling, tea was poured, and the lighting was soft. Everything about Piers Morgan tonight screamed calm professionalism. But what no one expected was how fast that calm would burn away. Because when Piers Morgan sat across from Meghan Markle for the first time in years, the air was thick with unfinished history, a clash waiting to erupt. The London skyline glittered in the background, the studio tinted with gold light. Piers Morgan, in his crisp navy suit, smiled into the camera with the kind of charm that only came before chaos. "Tonight," he began, his voice rich and welcoming, "a very special guest joins me. She's been called many things: a trailblazer, a disruptor, a survivor, and to some, even a rebel. Please welcome Meghan, Duchess of Sussex." Applause filled the room, polite, measured. Meghan walked in, perfectly styled, soft curls, yellow blouse under a black tailored blazer, and that signature composed smile that revealed nothing. She shook Piers's hand, but her eyes didn't quite meet his. "Lovely to see you again," Piers said, leaning forward with the warmth of an old acquaintance. "It's been quite a while, hasn't it?" Meghan smiled faintly. "Yes, Piers, though I imagine you've been keeping busy, commenting on my life from afar." The jab was light but sharp enough to draw an invisible line between them. Piers chuckled. "Well, you do make rather compelling headlines." Meghan tilted her head, her voice smooth as silk. "Headlines you helped create, I believe." The tension was mild, like static before a storm. Still, Piers held his composure. "Taché," he said with a grin. "But let's start fresh tonight, shall we? Tell me, how is life in California treating you? I hear the sun shines a little brighter when you're royalty in exile." Meghan's laugh was short. "Oh, I wouldn't call myself in exile, Piers. I left a system, a very broken system. Now I live freely. It's perfect, really." "Perfect?" Piers asked. "No regrets at all about leaving the royal family, the titles, the tradition?" Meghan's smile cooled. "I didn't lose anything worth regretting. I found peace, something the tabloids could never offer." Piers nodded slowly, crossing his legs, a flicker of steel in his eyes. "So, peace? And a few Netflix deals?" Her expression stiffened. "I think it's lovely that successful women still make you uncomfortable." There it was, the first real sting. The crew shifted behind the cameras. They'd felt the temperature drop. Piers forced a chuckle, brushing it off. "Not at all. I admire ambition. I just like to make sure the ambition isn't performative." "Oh, I'm sorry," Meghan said sweetly. "Would you rather I stayed quiet and grateful, smiling on cue like the women you prefer to interview?" The air grew tighter. Piers kept his voice calm, but the muscle in his jaw flexed. "I prefer authenticity, Duchess, not curated perfection. And I prefer not to be lectured on authenticity by someone who built a career out of gossip," Meghan shot back. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the hum of the studio lights seemed to falter. Piers broke it with a steady breath and a small, deliberate smile. "Right, well, I suppose this is going to be a lively evening then." Meghan crossed her legs, settling in, the faintest smirk on her lips. "You invited me, Piers. I assumed you were ready for honesty." "Oh, I'm ready," Piers replied quietly. "I just hope you are too." He shifted his note cards, regaining his composure. "Let's talk about the rumors then. The royal-sized elephant in the room. You and Prince Harry. The world seems curious about your current status." Meghan leaned back, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Curious? That's a polite way of saying obsessed." "I prefer the word interested," Piers countered. "After all, the two of you became global figures, redefining modern royalty." "Redefining? More like surviving it," Meghan replied. "But it's funny you bring up curiosity. The public seems to think they have the right to know everything. And journalists like you keep feeding that entitlement." Piers gave a diplomatic smile. "Information isn't entitlement, Meghan. It's journalism. The world asks questions. I just give them the microphone." "And I just happen to be your favorite topic," she replied dryly. "Well," Piers said, leaning forward slightly, You do tend to keep the conversation interesting." Meghan's voice turned cold. "I'm not your entertainment, Piers." For a second, the polite studio atmosphere cracked. Just a hairline fracture, but enough for everyone to see what was coming. Still, Piers smiled, the smile of a man who knew he was sitting on a time bomb, but wasn't quite ready to step away. "I'd never dare suggest that," he said softly. "But I do think the world deserves more than curated sound bites. Maybe tonight you'll finally tell your story. The real one." Meghan tilted her chin. "The real one? I think I already did, several times. But if you didn't understand it then, I doubt you will now." Her tone carried the weight of finality, like she was already above the conversation, untouchable. Piers' fingers tightened around his cue cards. His smile didn't move, but the warmth had drained completely. "Then I suppose," he said quietly, "we're about to find out how real you're willing to get." The camera slowly zoomed in as the tension settled like smoke in the air. Meghan met his gaze, calm, steady, unreadable. And for the first time that evening, it was clear. This wasn't an interview. It was a reckoning. The studio air had shifted. No one said it aloud, but everyone could feel it. The polite small talk was gone. The cordial tension had become a duel of words, a chess match played with poisoned pawns. Piers leaned back in his chair, his fingers interlaced, watching Meghan with the same calm curiosity a lion has before deciding whether to pounce. "So," he began smoothly, "let's revisit something you once said in that famous Oprah interview. You mentioned that certain members of the royal family had concerns about, well, let's call it, the complexion of your future child." Meghan's expression hardened instantly. "Ah, yes, the world remembers that line, don't they? But not the pain behind it. People like you made sure of that." Piers gave a small, understanding nod. "You have to admit, Meghan, that moment changed everything. It painted the monarchy as racist in the eyes of millions." "I didn't paint anything, Piers," she said, her tone clipped. "I spoke my truth." Piers tilted his head slightly. "And yet, when asked later to name who made those remarks, you refused. Doesn't speaking your truth usually involve telling the whole story?" Meghan's lips curved into a tight smile. "I wasn't there to feed your headlines or your next round of angry monologues. I was there to heal, something you might not understand." There was a subtle gasp from one of the crew members. Piers' smile flickered, but he kept his voice even. "Healing through half-truths. That's an interesting method, but let's move on." "Good idea," Meghan replied flatly. "You're not very good with nuance." "Oh, I'm good with plenty," he said, letting the jab slide. "Let's talk about your new life. California, Montecito, sunshine, chickens, and meditation. Tell us, is that where peace lives now?" Meghan gave a small laugh, the kind that sounded almost rehearsed. "Peace lives wherever you stop, letting bitter old men tell your story." Piers blinked. The audience, if there had been one, would have collectively leaned forward. "Old men?" he repeated with a faint grin. "You mean interviewers like me?" She nodded coolly. "Exactly. Men who think their outdated opinions still shape the world. You're like legacy media's last gasp before it fades into irrelevance." He laughed, low and genuine this time. "You really do have a gift for diplomacy, don't you?" "I have a gift for honesty," she said. "It just makes fragile egos uncomfortable." For the first time, Piers's mask slipped slightly. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his tone lowering. "Tell me, Meghan, do you ever get tired of playing the victim?" Her eyes flashed. "Playing?" she repeated, almost incredulous. "You think losing privacy, being vilified daily, and nearly breaking down is a performance?" Piers' tone remained calm, but the words were sharp. "I think you're a master storyteller, and maybe the story's gotten convenient." "Convenient?" Meghan shot back. "You think I wanted to be driven out of a country, chased by tabloids, mocked by people like you?" "People like me?" he echoed, his voice tightening. "I ask questions, Meghan. That's my job. The world deserves to ask questions of people who claim to be oppressed, while living in mansions and signing multi-million-dollar deals." Meghan folded her arms, eyes narrowing. You really hate women who refuse to play by your rules, don't you? On the contrary, Piers said, holding her gaze. I love strong women. I just prefer when their strength doesn't come at the expense of truth. Oh, please, she scoffed, waving a hand. You wouldn't know truth if it gave you a headline. The tension was thick now, molten, stretching the seams of civility. The control room producer glanced at the timer, whispering to a crew member. We're only halfway through. Piers adjusted his notes, pretending to refocus. All right, let's shift gears. How's Harry? Or should I say, how are you and Harry? Meghan leaned back, crossing one leg over the other, smirking. He's thriving. We both are. Because there have been reports, Piers continued delicately, that things aren't quite as idyllic as they appear. Rumors of strain. Her smile turned icy. Rumors are your bread and butter, aren't they, Piers? It must be exhausting trying to stay relevant through other people's lives. It's called journalism, he countered, and your life is public, by your own design. Public by necessity, she corrected, and I'm sorry if our happiness doesn't fit the tragedy narrative you wanted for us. Piers' laughter was short, dry. Happiness? You seem awfully defensive for someone who claims to be at peace. Meghan's tone dropped an octave. And you seem awfully obsessed with me for someone who pretends not to care. That landed. Piers' jaw tensed for half a second before he exhaled slowly, managing a smile. Fair point. But let's be clear. I critique ideas, not people. She raised an eyebrow. Oh, really? So those years of you dissecting every move I made, every outfit I wore, every expression on my face, that was just intellectual analysis? He chuckled. It was commentary, and frankly, you made it very easy. Her smirk vanished. You made it cruel. The words were like glass, quiet, sharp, and deliberate. For a moment, Piers softened. The air deflated slightly, a brief truce hovering in the silence. Then Meghan added with ice in her voice, but then again, cruelty sells, doesn't it, Piers? He stared at her, eyes steady. Not as much as self-pity does. The line hung in the air, heavy, final, brutal. Meghan's expression froze. The flicker of restraint left her face. Wow, she said, quietly. That's who you are then. Piers didn't look away. No, Meghan, that's who you've become. The cameras were still rolling, but no one dared breathe. They'd started the show with polite smiles and tea. Now, it felt like a war zone. And the worst part? They weren't done yet. The studio was quiet enough to hear the glint of a ring against a porcelain cup. Somewhere off camera, a light hummed. Piers glanced at his notes and then let them fall shut like a book he no longer needed. Let's talk work, he said evenly. Not rumor, not tabloids, deliverables, the podcasts, the documentaries, the publishing. You've had extraordinary deals. What do you feel most proud of? That actually changed lives? Meghan tilted her chin. Existing as myself changes lives, Piers. Representation is impact. Of course, he said. And between representation and results, which do you weigh more heavily when you measure success? She gave a brittle smile. I know this game. You want a spreadsheet of acceptable charity to validate my existence for your audience. I don't audition for approval. Piers didn't blink. No audition required. Just one concrete example of ongoing work. Dollars, programs, outcomes. My foundation supports initiatives worldwide, she replied, cool as ice. I won't turn real people into your talking points. Next question. He folded his hands. All right. Spotify said your deal ended by mutual agreement. Netflix scaled back. Are these the natural growing pains of building an independent brand? Or are you learning that audiences want more than posture? Her eyes flashed. Audiences want liberation. They respond to authenticity, not the patriarchy's permission slips. Piers smiled thinly. Right. But sometimes broadcasts are listened to, and sometimes they aren't. How do you, as a professional, calibrate to that? I don't calibrate for the comfort of critics, she said, and certainly not for ones who built careers ridiculing women who refused to bow. He let that sit, then pivoted, voice soft. Family? There's a story there too, isn't there? You've said you want healing. People want to root for that. Do you talk to them? Family is not a public service announcement, she said, and healing isn't for you to supervise. I'm not asking to supervise, he replied, keeping his tone warm. I'm asking the question any human would. Do you still want reconciliation? Meghan's gaze sharpened. I want what's healthy, what's safe. You'll forgive me if I don't crowdsource that decision with the man who treated my pain like a nightly sport. Piers inclined his head. Point taken. He flipped a card. Since you mentioned safety, there have been legal actions, security debates, statements that alarmed institutions. Do you feel any responsibility for ratcheting the temperature of public life? Or is the responsibility entirely external? The responsibility sits with those who hunted us, distorted us, commodified us, she said. If I light a beacon, I won't apologize that it exposes the wolves. He met her gaze. And if the beacon sometimes exposes mistakes you made too? She laughed softly. You're desperate for a gotcha. It's almost endearing. Almost. Piers let the jab pass. I'm interested in accountability. We all want the right to speak our truth. We don't all want the obligation to check it. Truth doesn't require permission, she said. It doesn't, he agreed. But credibility does tend to require evidence. A long beat. The control room had stopped whispering. Everyone was listening now, as if the air itself had leaned in. Let's go there directly, Piers continued. The Oprah interview, one of the most consequential cultural moments of the decade. You know what it did to the monarchy's image. You also know you left names out. Do you understand why the public feels you detonated a bomb and then refused to own the shrapnel? Meghan's voice went almost tender, dangerously so. Piers, you've built an empire from shrapnel. Don't lecture me about explosions. That's fair, he said quietly. I've made mistakes. I've apologized for some. I expect to be challenged. Do you? I expect to be obeyed by no one, she said, and validated by myself. He nodded once, then pushed forward. Harry, how is he really? He's fine, she said, eyes hard. We're fine. We don't need your pastoral care. There were reports about separate residences, he ventured. Are they untrue? They're irrelevant, she replied. But since you're so invested, no, we haven't asked you for a spare room. That's a relief, he said, half smiling. I'm not sure my sofa is red enough. She didn't laugh. Your jokes play better when the target can't answer back. And yet, here you are, he said gently. Answering back? Correcting, she said. Not answering. Piers leaned in just a fraction. Then, let's correct this. Were there staff departures because of a difficult work environment? Multiple outlets have documented high turnover. Is it them or is it you? Meghan's jaw set. Women with standards are labeled difficult. Women with boundaries are called tyrants. I'm neither. I simply refuse mediocrity. Is it mediocrity to disagree with you? He asked. It's mediocrity to misunderstand a mission and then resent the person who won't shrink to your comfort, she shot back. Something flickered in Piers' expression. Respect, maybe, braided with irritation. He switched tack. Your public statements have framed silence as complicity, but also privacy as a right. Is the balance simply that you decide which is which on any given day? That's called sovereignty, she said. You should try it. Sovereignty is earned, he said softly. Not declared. A micro pause. Her eyes narrowed. His stayed patient. Neither moved. Let's talk monarchy, he said at last. The institution you say harmed you is also the platform that made you possible to the world. Do you ever feel any gratitude for the stage, even if you despise the script? Meghan's answer was a scalpel. I was the stage. The sentence floated like a match head before it strikes. Piers tilted his head, studying her. You were the stage, he repeated. Is that how you see it? Everyone else? Players on you? Players on my back, she corrected, until I stood up. Standing up, he said, usually implies lifting others too. Do you see anyone lifted by the chaos, genuinely? Anyone who needed the permission to leave a gilded cage, she replied. Anyone who learned that survival is more important than obeisance. And anyone who felt you burned a bridge they were still trying to walk across? They can swim, she said. For the first time, Piers' smile died completely. He glanced toward the floor manager, then back to Meghan with a steadier, colder calm. All right, he said. Final round. You've said you want to be seen for your work. I'll give you the last word. What's the work? Not the aura, not the brand. The work you'll allow to be audited 5 years from now. Meghan's answer came wrapped in velvet and barbed wire. The work is changing who gets to ask the questions, and who has to answer them. Piers held her stare. That sounds less like service and more like supremacy. Maybe you should be less afraid of my voice, she said. It's not going away. He nodded once. I'm not afraid of your voice, Meghan. I'm worried for the people it drowns out. Silence, a long one. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate, as if they knew the next breath could crack the glass. Meghan leaned forward, almost smiling. You want a headline, Piers? Here it is. I owe you nothing. He breathed out. You owe the truth, he said. Not to me, to the people you keep recruiting into your pain. Her smile vanished. And you owe them their humanity. Try it sometime. A red tally light blinked on the primary camera. The segment clock ticked toward the break. Piers straightened his cards and didn't look down again. After the break, he said to the lens, voice controlled, we'll discuss legacy, what lasts after the lights go out. He cut his eyes back to Meghan, just for a heartbeat. And whether burning every bridge, he added quietly, is a legacy worth having. The screen faded to commercial. In the control room, someone finally exhaled. On the studio floor, a runner set 2 fresh glasses of water and fled like a messenger from a besieged city. When the music bumper stopped, the countdown began again. 5, 4, 3. They came back to air with smiles made of glass. The red light above the camera flicked back on. The host and the Duchess sat frozen for half a heartbeat before resuming their masks. Polite smiles, composed eyes, civil tones polished enough to hide the cracks beneath. But the tension was no longer background noise. It had a pulse of its own. Piers straightened his tie, his voice calm but edged with warning. Before the break, Meghan, you said something interesting. That your work is changing who gets to ask the questions. Would you agree that implies you'd rather control the narrative than engage in dialogue? Meghan smiled thinly, adjusting her blazer. No, Piers. It implies I'm tired of outdated men thinking they own the microphone. There's a difference. Piers gave a small nod. Then consider me outdated, but not owned. Still, I think conversations work best when both sides listen. Listening is easy when you're used to hearing your own echo, she replied coolly. The crew exchanged glances. She was going for blood now. Piers exhaled through his nose, steady. All right, let's talk empathy. You've spoken about compassion, kindness, and mental health awareness. But when I ask questions, you call them attacks. Isn't that a bit contradictory? Her laugh was soft and sharp all at once. Compassion doesn't mean letting people distort you on live television. I'm not here to play nice for your ratings, Piers. He leaned back. No one's asking you to play nice, just to play fair. She tilted her head, eyes glittering. Fair? You called me a liar for years. You mocked my marriage, my children, my mental health. And now you want me to believe you care about fairness? Piers's voice didn't rise, but something in his composure hardened. I care about truth. Always have. If you'd like to correct the record, this, right here, is your chance. The record doesn't need correcting, she said. It needs rewriting. He gave a small, humorless laugh. And you'd like to be the author, of course. Someone has to be, Meghan said, her tone biting. Because people like you keep plagiarizing women's pain. That did it. The air left the room. Even the floor manager looked down. Piers's jaw flexed, but his tone remained steady, restrained. Meghan, I invited you here in good faith. I believed we could have an honest conversation. But if all you're going to do is throw insults and perform martyrdom, maybe we should call this what it is, a waste of time. She leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping. Oh, you'd love that, wouldn't you? The angry woman walking off your show, proving your point for you. Not today. Then maybe you should try actually answering something, he replied, his restraint cracking at the edges now. Something real, something beyond polished victimhood. Her lips parted slightly, her calm faltering, for the first time. You don't get to define my reality, Piers. And you don't get to rewrite everyone else's, he shot back. The silence afterward was electric. 2 people, Two entirely different worlds, locked in a quiet storm under studio lights. Piers rubbed his temple and sighed. You know, Meghan, I've interviewed presidents, soldiers, survivors, even dictators, and they all had one thing in common. They could take a question without treating it as a personal attack. She crossed her arms. I'm not one of your soldiers or survivors, Piers. I'm not here to be interrogated. No, he said quietly. You're here to be adored. Her eyes flashed. I'm here to be heard. You've been heard, Meghan, loudly, endlessly. The world's been your audience for years. But what they're starting to realize is that every time someone tries to have a conversation with you, it turns into a coronation of your own self-righteousness. That line hung in the air like a thunderclap. Meghan stared at him, lips trembling with restrained fury. You're unbelievable. And you're exhausting, he said, almost sadly. Every question, every topic, it all turns into another lecture about how wrong everyone else is. At some point, the rest of the world stops listening. Oh, they're still listening, she snapped. They just prefer the truth over your bitterness. Piers' expression softened, not with sympathy, but with something closer to resignation. Then I think we're done here. Her eyes widened. Excuse me? You heard me, he said, standing from his chair. This interview is over. I've hosted difficult people before, politicians, provocateurs, but never someone so convinced that criticism equals cruelty. Meghan straightened in her seat, her voice rising. So, this is how you end things? By silencing women again? He leaned on the desk, looking at her evenly. No, Meghan. I'm ending things by not rewarding arrogance. There's a difference. She stared at him, speechless for a heartbeat, then gave a cold, mirthless laugh. You really haven't changed. Neither have you, he said quietly, still allergic to accountability. The cameras were still rolling, but Piers turned to the crew. We're done. Cut it. The studio lights dimmed slightly as a producer gestured off camera, signaling the end. But Meghan stayed seated, her chin lifted defiantly. You'll regret this, she said. Piers smiled, calm, final. I doubt it. Then he walked off stage. Meghan sat alone for a moment, the hum of the equipment filling the void. For all her practiced composure, something flickered in her expression. Not guilt, not shame, but disbelief that someone had dared to stop her mid-performance. The clip hit the internet within hours. Headlines exploded. Piers Morgan ends explosive interview with Meghan Markle. Social. Media split down the middle, half applauding Piers for standing his ground, half branding him the villain again. But one thing everyone agreed on. They had never seen anything quite like it. Because when pride meets patience, one always cracks first. And this time, it wasn't Piers Morgan. If you made it this far, you know this isn't just an interview. It's a moment of television history. So tell us, whose side are you on? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Was Piers right to end it, or did Meghan simply refuse to be silenced? And don't forget, if you enjoy powerful, dramatic stories like this one, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next showdown that everyone will be talking about.